Hey there, how's it going? My name is Benji, and welcome to episode 2 of A Beginner's Guide to Ambient Music. Before we get into this episode, I just want to take some time to thank you all for the response on the first video. Everybody was super kind in the comments, and I'm really appreciative of all the feedback, so thank you for that. So I wanted to focus this next episode on songwriting and how to approach experimental techniques, but I pretty quickly hit a few roadblocks. First and foremost, I am obviously not the be-all end-all expert when it comes to that sort of thing, and I wouldn't feel comfortable sitting in front of a camera and telling people that the way I create is the way to do it. Secondly, as a person who has been in this world of creativity for a while, I wasn't sure if I could come up with the best information for a complete beginner. Lastly, the subject of songwriting being so broad, I wasn't even sure where to start broaching this topic from. So I came to the realization that I would need to approach this as more of a collaborative project and get more people involved. So I reached out to some close friends of mine who are either on the fringes and the peripherals of ambient or experimental music, or have no idea where to start approaching this in the first place.
Hi, I'm Philip Bassnight.
Hey Ben, it's Sam Atkinson.
My name is Tymir.
Hi, I'm Colin. I'm the drummer from the band Broke Royals.
I'm a singer, songwriter, and guitarist from Washington, D.C.
I've been playing music for 7 years, primarily guitar and bass.
I play music in several bands, generally playing bass. I do looping music. I sing background vocals. I just play a lot of random things and make noise.
I've been playing in bands since I was 14 years old. Everything from guitar to drums to bass. I've done a little bit of everything.
I had a chat with them about the questions that they had when it came to the specifics of songwriting and song structure. Then I reached out to some artists who are more closely involved in ambient music and asked them if they'd be willing to sit down with me and have a little interview, do a couple questions between us, see if we can have a chat and come to the bottom of what I've gathered. Finally, I decided to split this into a 2-part video. The first one focusing on songwriting specifics, and the second one focusing more on inspiration and creativity, even though I know that there's going to be some overlap between the two. So for this first video, I sat down with a friend and a local artist named Benjamin Malk. Can you introduce yourself for those who may or may not know you?
Yeah, my name is Benjamin Malk. I am a musician in Richmond, Virginia, and I write music, I compose music, and I also teach music here in Richmond, Virginia as well.
Cool, awesome. And at least your personal stuff, I know you play drums in a very good band, but also your personal stuff kind of leans more towards the experimental electronic ambient sort of genre, correct?
Yeah, I've been playing drums for, I guess about 15 years now. And so that's kind of like my main musical output, I guess, and studied music in college and everything. But more recently, within the past probably 10 years or so, 8 to 10 years, I've dabbled in writing my own music and trying out ambient things and experimental stuff. Yeah.
As an ambient artist, how do you think about structuring songs, and how does that differ from structuring a song that starts with a different instrument?
So I normally approach a song in the sense that I kind of look for a certain sound that I want to create. Like, say if I'm listening to something and I'm like, oh, I really want to create this sound because I love how that sounds. That's basically like the impetus that drives me to write music. So I really want to recreate some certain sounds, and then I kind of write based on that. Normally, I'm not really doing something too structured. I try not to plan out things too far in advance. But I kind of like move as the music takes me. Once I get a certain sound that I like, and it definitely can be inspired by the instrument that I'm using. I definitely will write differently for like my modular, if I'm using like a regular synthesizer or my computer, I write a lot differently, I think. definitely the main thing is I'm always looking for a certain type of sound that I want to create.
I know you put out a little record recently where you kind of went against that in some sort of a way, where you really went exclusively like with a specific instrument. It was the Novation Peak, wasn't it? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so more recently I've been trying new things with composition and trying to push myself to try new things. And I wanted to see if I could write a full album just with one synthesizer. And I did that with the Novation Peak. And that kind of was a very fun process for me. It's a very inspiring instrument. It's very immediate. You just turn knobs and you get really good results very instantly. And it kind of inspired me to want to create an album just with that synthesizer alone. So I learned a lot of new tricks, and I learned a lot about Ableton and how to stack things and sync things with tempo. And a lot of my work hasn't been really done with tempo in the past, or at least syncing everything. So I kind of learned a lot of new things in that regard, and also a lot about arranging and trying to make something interesting with a very small set of materials. So it was very fun.
Do you find as a songwriter that planning out where you're going to go is creatively restricting or creatively enabling? And, vice versa. If you don't plan where you're going to go, do you feel like that opens up new doors or closes them?
I think maybe more recently I've been trying to plan out things further in advance. But I think typically if I'm doing something just on my own, just for fun, I really will just kind of focus on a sound and let that kind of take me where it takes me. And if it becomes like, a track with a bass drum kick or something, that's fine. Or if it just becomes a pure, just like 30-minute, ambient soundscape, that's fine too. But usually I try not to let a certain style dictate where I go. Unless I'm doing a commission or something, which recently my wife has commissioned me to do some writing for her D&D campaign. So
that's cool.
Yeah, so I'm purposefully trying different styles, and I have end results in mind, which I have found that it has been very hard for me, but also very rewarding and kind of engaging, and it's allowed me to learn a lot of new things. So that's been fun.
I'm very much in the same thing where it's like I like to kind of just let it wander and let it go. And when I'm working on I'm not having necessarily a specific goal, but I have a time frame that I have to work in that's really super compressed, and it ends up kind of changing everything about how I go for. And at first it was terrible and it was the worst thing in the world, but now it's one of the more fun things I do in the week because I've kind of learned how to adapt myself to that.
When you're writing ambient music, do you have a certain song length in mind, or do you let it flow for as long as it can before you end it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I do think about the time. It's hard to explain. I've only ever done a really long track once in my life, and that was a 30-minute thing just for a big long form compilation. Mm-hmm. But the rest of my tracks kind of ebb and flow with the song length, and I'll let them be long or let them be short. But I think when I think of time, I'm normally just thinking of how long I like a certain section. So if, just according to my brain and what I like to hear, if I'm getting bored of this section and I feel like it's too long for 3 minutes, then I'll just cut it, or shorten it or whatever. Just basically according to my tastes. So I try not to let any other thing dictate how long or short a song is going to be. Trying to think about, is a casual listener going to like this? Is it going to be long enough or short enough for them? I try not to let that dictate me, but I try to just think of how much I like that certain section or not, and that kind of so in a way I do think of time, but in a way I don't.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I think that this question came from I think this came from Phil from Broke Royals, and I think that this was one that was like a one of the ones that like I think is like actually a really important question for someone beginning this, because I think that like if there's someone who's kind of used to the more traditional songwriting sort of thing, kind of the thing is like you want to keep it within, I don't know, if you're writing like a pop song, you kind of want to keep it like no longer than like 4 minutes 15 seconds, but you don't want to have like a 2-minute long song or something like that, and sort of eschewing all of that in sort of I think that's like the biggest thing to like the first step for me is to like eschew the traditions and the structures and more listen to what is happening in your machine and see, do I like this? Do I want this to keep going? Or do I want this to change into something else? Or is this the end of it?
So there's always a point where we edit and edit and edit and add and retake and all these other things in the process. When you reach that point in this particular realm of music, when do you know when to scale back?
Well, it definitely depends on the track, I think. Some of my tracks are like, I go on my Ableton thing and I see, 12 separate tracks or whatever. And then my other stuff is just one, single take. And I think the line is like muddiness, really. Like if you're trying to achieve a certain kind of, tone of the song or like moment or something, it's kind of hard to describe, but yeah, you don't want it to be too muddy, and you don't want certain things to not cut out in the mix. For example, like a melody. If I really have a strong melody that I really love, I can't have that really low in the mix, and I can't have too many instruments underneath it that are kind of distracting from that melody. Even if they sound really interesting, I might have to cut some different things just because I really want that part to stand out. So when all of those things are together, that's kind of when my track is complete. But yeah, normally I'm looking for muddiness and just kind of when I'm not bored of a track too, that kind of helps,
Yeah, that does.
What is the role of tempo and melody in ambient music?
Well, I don't think ambient music means we should eschew rhythm. I think it has its place within that realm. It's very unfortunate that ambient is such a broad term of different styles. It's just become a blanket term for all these different things. So it's kind of hard to get rid of something like rhythm within that context. So I think it has its place, and I definitely use rhythm like quite a bit. But a lot of my tracks, I try not to focus on, is this going to be a BPM of 130 or something like that. I'm not really saying that in the beginning. I'm just saying, what kind of texture do I want to create? What kind of mood do I want to evoke? And where do I want to go with this track? And so if that wants to build with rhythm during a certain section, then I'll add some rhythms. And I think rhythm is a very effective tool in any certain situation. But also, I think if you're writing ambient music, you shouldn't feel like you have to use rhythm at all. I think you can, honestly, you can do whatever you want, but really ambient music is just about like the texture, I think is the main issue here, what we're looking for as an ambient songwriter. And that's the main purpose of what we're doing, I guess.
My approach to rhythm is kind of like how a hip-hop person would approach melody, where it's probably not the first thing you're thinking about, because when you're creating hip-hop, you're very much more trying to find like a groove, you're trying to find a rhythm, you're trying to find something that keeps the beat and keeps the flow moving.
Yeah.
But it also can be incredibly like a vital part of a specific song, and it's not necessarily something that you need to be like tied to per se, but it also like doesn't mean that you need to eschew it because there is so much value in both ends. So there's this guy, Alex Roldan, who has this really nice track. I can't remember the name of it, but it has these drums that are just crashing in through the background. And it's I would still qualify it under like ambient because it's got this really nice intense, it becomes less about the rhythm of the drums, even though they are quite rhythmic, and more becomes about creating a really oppressive atmosphere.
Are there any do's and don'ts in ambient music? My inclination is no, but in order to have a genre, you kind of have to have at least general style guides.
Well, I guess, you know, when I think of creating ambient music, I'm always thinking of a texture that and a mood that I'm trying to evoke, and it's usually some sort of melancholic mood traditionally. And the way, like I was, kind of mentioning earlier, I'm not really writing in a traditional song structure, so I'm not thinking of verse, chorus, bridge, that kind of thing. And when you create ambient music, I think that may be a part of it. You know, you're creating a texture, and you're creating something that can stand for itself, and most of the time does not have any rhythm or kind of like intentional motion, I guess. I think I'm trying to avoid having a normal traditional song structure, like you said, in a rock band. That's kind of what we're focusing on. That's what I do in my band. But when I'm writing music, I'm just kind of thinking of a tone or a timbre that evoking a mood.
I think what's most important about all of this is obviously it's weird and it's different, and you can't really always 100% explain it, because there is if you could explain it perfectly every time, I don't think it would be experimental.
Do you have any tips for someone who is interested in learning more but doesn't want to feel overwhelmed by the world of ambient music?
Let's see if I can explain this. There's a very sharp and kind of steep learning curve, I think, with synthesis that is trying to be erased more recently with a lot of new gear and things like YouTube tutorials and that kind of thing. And those exist more often now, thankfully. And I think that helps people that are trying to get into it more. And of course, things like you're doing here. But I mean, a big piece of advice is don't worry too much about the gear. And you'll probably hear this a lot, but people are going to say, don't worry about the gear. And I think it's very important, because if you want to write music, it should be more about what you're trying to achieve and that kind of thing. So if you want to start with something simple, like just using something on your computer, there's plenty of options. You can get like a simple version of Ableton for free many places, or just a little MIDI controller, and you can play many things through doing that, and you can write anything you want, really. But let it be a slow process after that if you want to grow and get more gear, and really do your research and try to learn the instruments that you buy, if you buy any instruments in the future too. But one other thing I was going to say is when I wanted to create something, and when I was thinking about buying gear, I was always like, what kind of sound do I want to make? What do I want to achieve? And that was done by listening to a lot of music. So I would say, I want to create music like so-and-so. And for me, that was kind of like Tim Hecker or Stars of the Lid or things like that. And so I went online and I searched a lot for what they used, and then go from there. And that helped me a lot, kind of more achieve what I wanted to create. So yeah, listening is a big part of that too.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. I know that, like, from my sort of like guitar experiences and stuff, there's kind of this sort of thing where it's like, oh, you don't want to copy someone, you don't want to do anything like that. And while I think that's true to a certain extent, obviously you don't want to, you don't want to write Karma Police and then say, guys, I wrote this song, it's very cool. But I think that, like, not being afraid to let the things that made you want to do it be a part of why you're doing that. I think that, like, you shouldn't be afraid of that. I think that there's something, like, really important to, like, if you find something that inspires you, maybe it won't be, like, absolutely don't, like, try to rip it off or anything, but, like, do everything you can to be like, well, why did I like this? And then start digging deeper and, like, see if you can use that as a jumping off point for something of yourself. And listening is super important with that. I'm glad you threw out artist names, because I was going to ask you for artist names, because that's like a, that's one of those things where, like, for me, it was like, I could hear a lot of people saying it's like a bunch of this stuff, but for me, like, finding things that it doesn't even necessarily have to be like straight up like your traditional, whatever your traditional conception of ambient is. Like, I've been really inspired by Fortet lately, and it's like, that's not really ambient, but there's a lot of what you would hear in ambient production going in a lot of their songs. Especially their I can't remember the name of the record, but it's the one with 2017 on it and LA Trance and all of that stuff. And there's these really like there's a lot of, like, kind of your traditional sort of like IDM-ish rhythms, but there's a lot of really lush textures, and there are one or two tracks that are like interludes that I would just qualify as ambient tracks. And getting inspiration from those places, I think, is more important than what you get in your studio, because you can have all the best gear in the world, but if you don't know what sound you're trying to make, it is going to take you a hell of a long time to guess your way into it. So
Yes, yeah. Knowing what you want to create is very important. Yeah, because you can just go down a rabbit hole and not achieve anything if you don't have, like, a purpose for it. So knowing what you want to create.
Yeah. Where can people, like, if they want to find you or your music, where can they find any of that stuff?
Well, all my music is on Bandcamp, so you can look up, just search for my name, Benjamin Malk. I just released an album a couple months ago called A Cable Tethered to the Sky. You can search for that on Bandcamp. And the rest of my albums are scattered throughout on various labels as well. So
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and yeah, have a good one. So that's it for episode 2 of Ambient Songwriting for Beginners. I want to thank Benjamin Malk one more time for sitting down with me and talking about these questions. I'd also like to thank Philip, Timir, Colin, and Sam for providing me with these questions. I think they were really interesting, and I think they pulled out some really interesting discussions from both of us, so thank you for that. The sister episode to this is already in production, and I'm really excited about the artist I'm going to be interviewing, so if you don't want to miss that, you can hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell down below. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a like, and let's keep this discussion about songwriting going on in the comments. I'm really interested to get other people's perspectives on these questions. Thank you all so much for watching this, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.